Donald Trump, the strategy that changed American politics forever. Every successful revolution has a strategy behind it. Some are carefully planned over years. Others are improvised in the moment. Donald Trump's strategy was neither. It was something more dangerous. An instinctive understanding of human psychology, media dynamics, and tribal identity that politicians had spent careers trying to master. He did it naturally, and he used it to rewrite the rules of American politics in ways that can never be undone. This isn't a story about whether Trump was right or wrong. This is a story about how he won, and why his strategy will be copied for generations. The strategy began with a simple realization. American politics in 2015 was running on an outdated operating system. Politicians still campaigned like it was 1992. Carefully crafted policy positions, focus-grouped messaging, cautious statements designed not to offend. They were playing checkers. Trump was about to flip the board and play a completely different game. But what nobody expected was how perfectly his instincts matched the moment. The first element of Trump's strategy: never apologize. Ever. In traditional politics, a scandal followed a predictable pattern. The story breaks. The politician issues a statement expressing regret. They apologize. They promise to do better. The news cycle moves on. This pattern had been followed for decades. It was the price of survival. Trump looked at that pattern and saw weakness. When the Access Hollywood tape dropped, when he was caught on a hot mic bragging about sexual assault, every political consultant in America knew what he had to do. Apologize. Show contrition. Beg for forgiveness. That's how you survive. Trump held a press conference and attacked Bill Clinton instead. He brought Clinton's accusers on stage. He went on offense. He never actually apologized. And something remarkable happened. It worked. His base forgave him because he showed strength, not weakness. He discovered that, in modern politics, the appearance of strength matters more than actual morality. Nequili memento, political strategy changed forever. The second element: dominate the news cycle at all costs. Trump understood something about modern media that no politician had fully grasped. In the age of social media and 24-hour news, attention is the only currency that matters. It doesn't matter if the attention is positive or negative. What matters is that all eyes are on you. Traditional politicians tried to generate positive coverage. They'd carefully plan announcements. They'd coordinate with friendly journalists. They'd try to control their message. Trump did the opposite. He'd tweet something outrageous at 3 a.m. He'd insult a rival. He'd make a provocative statement with no basis in fact. And every news network would spend the next 48 hours talking about it. While his opponents were spending millions on TV ads, Trump was getting billions in free media. CNN would literally show an empty podium waiting for Trump to speak instead of covering other candidates' actual speeches. He'd hacked the media's business model. They needed ratings. He generated ratings. They were trapped in a symbiotic relationship they couldn't escape. But what nobody expected was how this would make him immune to scandal. In traditional politics, scandals matter because they're rare. When a politician gets caught in a scandal, it dominates the news for weeks. The sustained attention destroys their credibility. But Trump generated so many controversies so quickly that none of them could dominate for long. By the time the media fully covered one scandal, 3 more had erupted. It was scandal saturation. The outrage machine couldn't keep up. This wasn't accidental. Trump had learned from decades in tabloid media that you can survive any individual scandal if you immediately create a new distraction. Keep moving. Stay on offense. Never let one story define you. It was a strategy borrowed from celebrity culture and applied to politics with devastating effectiveness. The third element: create an us versus them narrative where you're always the victim. Trump's genius wasn't just in attacking opponents. It was in positioning himself as perpetually under attack. Every criticism was evidence of a conspiracy. Every investigation was a witch hunt. Every negative story was fake news. This strategy was psychologically brilliant. His supporters didn't have to defend Trump's actual behavior. They just had to believe that the attacks on him were unfair. And Trump gave them plenty of reasons to believe that. He pointed to media bias, which was real. He pointed to establishment opposition, which was real. He pointed to double standards, which were real. He took real grievances and amplified them until his supporters saw everything through that lens. When you're always the victim, your supporters become your defenders. They're not supporting your behavior. They're defending you from unfair attacks. It's a crucial psychological difference. And it made Trump's base incredibly loyal because they felt like they were fighting alongside him against a corrupt system. But what nobody expected was how this would create a permission structure for previously unacceptable behavior. The fourth element: speak to emotions, not facts. Traditional politicians tried to win arguments with data, with policy papers, with logical reasoning. Trump understood that humans don't work that way. People make decisions emotionally and then rationalize them logically. So he went straight for the emotions. He didn't present a detailed immigration plan. He talked about rapists and murderers crossing the border. He didn't explain trade policy. He talked about jobs stolen by China. He didn't discuss healthcare reform. He talked about Obamacare being a disaster. Specific, visceral, emotional language that bypassed the rational brain entirely. When fact-checkers called him out, it didn't matter. His supporters weren't supporting him because of facts. They were supporting him because he made them feel heard, feel angry, feel like someone was finally fighting for them. The fact checks just proved that the establishment was trying to silence him with their expert opinions. Nquili memento, truth became optional in American politics. The fifth element: identify the enemy and never stop attacking. Trump didn't just run against Hillary Clinton in 2016. He ran against the entire establishment. Crooked Hillary, Lion Ted, Low Energy Jeb, Little Marco. He branded his opponents with nicknames that reduced them to caricatures. And the nicknames stuck because they contained an element of truth that people recognized. But he didn't stop at opponents. He made enemies of institutions themselves. The media became fake news and the enemy of the people. The intelligence community became the deep state. Federal judges became so-called judges. The FBI became corrupt. He taught his supporters to distrust every institution that might check his power. This was perhaps his most dangerous innovation. By delegitimizing institutions, he made himself the only source of truth his supporters trusted. When the media reported something negative, it was fake news. When courts ruled against him, they were biased. When intelligence agencies contradicted him, they were part of the deep state. He created a closed information loop where only he was trustworthy. But what nobody expected was how this would fracture Americans into separate realities. The sixth element: promise simple solutions to complex problems. Trump's policy positions were rarely detailed because details don't inspire. Build the wall and make Mexico pay for it is simple. People can understand it. They can chant it. It doesn't matter that it's not a realistic policy. What matters is that it's a clear, simple promise that makes people feel like there's an easy solution. This worked because many Americans were tired of being told that problems were complicated. They were tired of politicians explaining why things couldn't be done. They were tired of nuance. Trump promised that everything was simple. We just needed someone who wasn't weak, who wasn't corrupt, who would actually do what needed to be done. The fact that his simple solutions often wouldn't work didn't matter. By the time that became clear, he'd moved on to the next simple solution. And his supporters, invested in believing he was different, rationalized the failures as the establishment sabotaging him. The seventh element: rally the base, forget everyone else. Traditional campaigns tried to build a coalition. You needed your base plus moderates plus some swing voters. You had to appeal to the center. Trump ignored this completely. He focused entirely on energizing his base and turning them out in massive numbers. This was radical because it required writing off huge portions of the electorate. Trump never tried to win over minorities. He never tried to win over college-educated women. He never tried to win over coastal elites. He wrote them off completely and focused on turning out white working-class voters at historic levels. It worked because these voters felt forgotten by both parties. Democrats had moved toward identity politics and cultural progressivism. Republicans had focused on tax cuts for the wealthy. Nobody was speaking directly to the economic anxiety and cultural displacement these voters felt. Trump did, and they rewarded him with loyalty that transcended any individual scandal or controversy. The eighth element: make everything about loyalty. Trump didn't build a political movement based on ideology or policy. He built it on personal loyalty to him. Republicans who'd spent careers advocating for free trade abandoned those positions when Trump opposed them. Politicians who'd written about the importance of character ignored his behavior. The party became a personality cult. This was strategically brilliant because it meant Trump could shift positions without losing support. He could contradict himself day to day and it didn't matter. His supporters weren't following his policies. They were following him. Whatever he said became the position. Loyalty wasn't to ideas. It was to the man. But what nobody expected was how this would make the Republican Party unable to move beyond him. The ninth element: use social media to bypass traditional gatekeepers. Twitter became Trump's most powerful weapon. At 3 a.m., he could tweet something that would dominate the news for days. He didn't need press secretaries or communications teams to filter his message. He spoke directly to supporters and directly to media. This gave him unprecedented control over his narrative. When traditional media reported something he didn't like, he could immediately respond to millions of followers with his version. He could attack journalists by name. He could threaten opponents. He could set the agenda for what everyone would be discussing, all from his phone. Previous politicians had social media accounts, but they used them cautiously, with everything vetted by communications teams. Trump's Twitter was raw, unfiltered, often misspelled, always authentic. And that authenticity was powerful. People felt like they were seeing the real person, not a carefully managed persona. The 10th element: turn grievance into identity. Trump didn't just appeal to people who were angry. He made that anger a core part of their identity. Being a Trump supporter meant being someone who'd been disrespected, ignored, mocked by elites. It meant being part of a movement against the establishment. This was psychologically powerful because it gave people a sense of purpose. They weren't just voting for a candidate. They were part of a revolution. They were the forgotten men and women that Trump talked about. Their support for him became wrapped up in their self-image. Abandoning Trump would mean abandoning that identity. This is why Trump's support was so durable. His supporters had invested their self-worth in defending him. When others attacked Trump, they felt personally attacked. When Trump won, they felt personally vindicated. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about their place in American society. But what nobody expected was how this would make deprogramming impossible. The 11th element: reframe every loss as a moral victory. Trump never actually lost anything in his telling. When he lost the Iowa caucus, he blamed a rigged system. When he lost the popular vote, he claimed millions of illegal votes. When he lost in 2020, he claimed massive fraud. He taught his supporters that any loss was actually proof of corruption. This was brilliant because it meant he could never be defeated. If he won, the system worked. If he lost, the system was rigged. His supporters learned to interpret every outcome through this lens. It made him perpetually victorious in their eyes, regardless of actual results. And when he did face setbacks, he'd claim they were strategic. When staff left, he'd say he fired them. When policies failed, he'd blame saboteurs. When investigations found wrongdoing, he'd claim vindication based on selective quotes taken out of context. He was a master of narrative control.
Essa decisão teria consequências irreversíveis para a democratic legitimacy.
The 12th element: exploit tribal identity and culture war. Trump understood that America was deeply divided not just on policy but on culture. Urban versus rural, college-educated versus working class, cosmopolitan versus nationalist. He deliberately picked the side that felt like it was losing the culture war. He made political correctness a central enemy. He said things that were deliberately offensive because it showed he wasn't controlled by coastal elite sensibilities. When people clutched their pearls, it proved his point. He was willing to say what others were thinking but were too afraid to say. This cultural positioning was more powerful than any policy position. His supporters weren't voting based on tax policy or healthcare plans. They were voting based on who made them feel like their way of life was being defended. Trump positioned himself as the defender of traditional America against progressive change. The genius was that every attack on Trump reinforced this positioning. When celebrities mocked him, it proved he was against Hollywood elites. When academics criticized him, it proved he was against ivory tower intellectuals. When journalists fact-checked him, it proved he was against mainstream media. The attacks became advertising. But what nobody expected was how this would make compromise impossible. The 13th element: promise chaos as the solution. Traditional politicians promise stability, normalcy, competent governance. Trump promised to burn it all down. And for millions of Americans who felt the system had failed them, burning it down sounded pretty good. He didn't have detailed policy proposals because the details didn't matter. The message was simple: I'm going to disrupt everything. I'm going to break all the rules. I'm going to do things no politician has ever done before. For people who felt abandoned by the system, this was incredibly appealing. And when he got into office and created chaos, his supporters saw it as him keeping his promise. The chaos wasn't a bug. It was a feature. He was fighting so hard that of course things were messy. He was taking on such powerful enemies that of course there was turbulence. The chaos became evidence that he was actually doing what he promised. Nequili memento, dysfunction became a selling point. The 14th element: control through controversy. Trump discovered that by creating constant controversy, he could control what everyone was talking about. When negative stories emerged, he'd create a new controversy that was even more outrageous. The media would chase the new shiny object, and the old story would be forgotten. This gave him incredible agenda-setting power. He decided what the national conversation was about. When he wanted to distract from bad news, he'd tweet something inflammatory. When he wanted attention on an issue, he'd make a controversial statement about it. He was conducting the media like an orchestra. The genius was that the media couldn't ignore him even when they knew they were being manipulated. His tweets were news because he was president. His statements had to be covered. So even when journalists understood the strategy, they were helpless to resist it. They were trapped in a cycle of their own making. But what nobody expected was how exhausting this would become for everyone. The 15th element: redefine winning and losing on your own terms. Trump didn't accept the traditional metrics of political success. Approval ratings, fake polls, unfavorable coverage, fake news, policy failures, the deep state's fault. He simply redefined what success looked like based on whatever made him look good. This was psychologically liberating for him and his supporters. They didn't have to accept negative assessments from institutions they distrusted. They could create their own reality where Trump was always winning. Crowd sizes, rally enthusiasm, social media engagement, these became the real measures of success while traditional metrics were dismissed. This strategy broke the shared understanding of objective reality that democracy depends on. When two sides can't even agree on what winning looks like, how can they have productive debates about policy? They can't. And Trump didn't want productive debates. He wanted total victory. The 16th element: survive through shamelessness. Traditional politicians could be shamed into resignation. If caught in a scandal, peer pressure and public humiliation would force them out. Trump discovered that if you simply refuse to feel shame, the mechanism breaks. You can't be shamed out of office if you're shameless. This was perhaps his most revolutionary insight. Shame only works if you accept the authority of those trying to shame you. Trump rejected that authority completely. When people called for his resignation, he attacked them instead. When scandals emerged, he denied everything and went on offense. Without shame, accountability disappeared. His supporters learned this lesson too. They stopped feeling embarrassed by his behavior because he taught them that the people criticizing him had no moral authority. Why should they feel ashamed when the people judging Trump were hypocrites themselves? He gave them permission to abandon shame as a social force. The 17th element: make loyalty a two-way street with supporters, not with allies. Trump demanded absolute loyalty from everyone around him. But he only gave it back to his supporters, never to political allies. He'd throw anyone under the bus if it served his interests. His attorney general, his vice president, his cabinet members, none of them were safe from his wrath if they showed insufficient loyalty. But his supporters, he never betrayed them. Even when they did terrible things, even when they broke laws, he defended them or pardoned them. This created an incredibly strong bond. His supporters knew that while everyone else would be sacrificed, Trump would never abandon them. This inverted the traditional political relationship. Usually politicians need their staff and colleagues. Trump only needed his base. He could cycle through administrations, but as long as the base was loyal, he was secure. This made him nearly impossible to control through traditional means. But what nobody expected was how this would create a cult-like devotion. The 18th element: weaponize victimhood. Despite being a billionaire with his name on buildings worldwide, Trump positioned himself as a victim. He was victimized by the media, by the deep state, by Democrats, by rhinos, by everyone. This sounds absurd, but it was strategically perfect. His supporters, many of whom felt like victims themselves, saw Trump as fighting their battles. When he was attacked, they felt attacked. When he claimed persecution, they believed him because they felt persecuted too. The wealthiest president in American history became the champion of the forgotten working class by claiming to be a victim just like them. This also gave him unlimited permission to fight dirty. Victims are allowed to fight back by any means necessary. So every norm Trump broke, every rule he violated, every line he crossed, it was all justified as self-defense against persecution. He wasn't the aggressor. He was the victim fighting back. Nequili memento, victimhood became power instead of weakness. The 19th element: promise retribution and never let grievances die. Trump never forgot a slight. He kept lists of enemies. He promised revenge. And his supporters loved it because they had grievances too. They wanted someone who would fight for them the way Trump fought for himself. Traditional politicians tried to heal divisions, to bring people together, to move forward. Trump picked at every wound. He reminded supporters of every injustice. He kept them angry, kept them motivated, kept them ready to fight. Forgiveness was weakness. Retribution was strength. This kept his base permanently mobilized. They couldn't relax because the enemies were always there, always plotting, always trying to destroy Trump. Every day was a battle. Every election was existential. The constant state of war kept turnout high and loyalty absolute. But what nobody expected was how this would poison American political culture permanently. The 20th element: blur the line between truth and performance. Trump came from reality TV where drama is manufactured and truth is whatever serves the narrative. He brought that sensibility to politics. It didn't matter if something was literally true. What mattered was whether it was true enough or served the larger point. Obama founded ISIS. Obviously false literally, but Trump would argue it captured a larger truth about Obama's Middle East policy. Thousands of Muslims celebrated 9/11 in New Jersey. Never happened, but it captured how some people felt. The literal truth was less important than the emotional truth. This broke political discourse because there was no longer a shared factual baseline. Everything became interpretation. Everything became narrative. And Trump supporters accepted this because they believed the media lied to them anyway. If everyone's lying, why not support the liar who's on your side?
Essa decisão teria consequências irreversíveis para consensus reality.
The strategy worked. Trump won in 2016 against all odds. He survived scandals that would have destroyed anyone else. He was impeached twice and acquitted twice. He was indicted 4 times, and it only made him stronger. He lost in 2020, attempted to overturn the election, incited an insurrection, and still returned to win in 2024. Every element of his strategy will be studied and copied. Future politicians will see what worked and try to replicate it. Some already have. The strategy proved that in modern America, shamelessness beats decency, controversy beats substance, loyalty beats principle, and emotion beats facts. This is Trump's legacy. Not his policies, but his strategy. He showed that you can break every norm, violate every tradition, ignore every rule, and not only survive but thrive. He proved that the old political playbook is obsolete. He wrote a new one, and American politics will never be the same. But what nobody can predict is where this leads. If Trump's strategy becomes the norm, what happens to democracy? If every politician adopts these tactics, how does governance work? If truth becomes optional and shame disappears, what holds society together? The strategy that changed American politics forever may have done more than change politics. It may have changed America itself. Trump showed that you can win by dividing instead of uniting, by lying instead of being honest, by attacking institutions instead of strengthening them, by encouraging tribalism instead of building coalitions. Nacquili memento, we entered an era where the old rules are dead but new rules haven't been established. Trump's strategy worked because it exploited weaknesses in American democracy that were always there. The polarization, the media's business model, the decline of local news, the rise of social media, the erosion of trust in institutions, the economic anxiety, the cultural division. Trump didn't create these conditions. He just understood them better than anyone else and exploited them ruthlessly. And now those conditions are worse than ever. Trust in media is at historic lows. Political polarization is at levels not seen since the Civil War. Americans exist in separate information ecosystems. Institutional legitimacy has collapsed. The center has disappeared. And Trump showed everyone how to profit from this chaos. The strategy that changed American politics forever is ultimately a strategy of destruction. Destroy norms. Destroy trust.
Destroy institutions.
Destroy shared reality. And build your power on the rubble. It works. We know it works because Trump did it successfully twice. The question is whether American democracy can survive multiple politicians using this strategy. Whether institutions can maintain legitimacy when every leader attacks them. Whether truth can survive when every politician treats it as optional. Whether compromise is possible when both sides see the other as existential threats. Trump's strategy changed American politics forever. Whether it destroyed American politics forever is the question we're about to find out. Because the strategy is out there now. The playbook is written. And nothing can put this genie back in the bottle. This is how one man's instinctive understanding of modern media, human psychology, and tribal identity rewrote the rules of American politics. And we're all living in the world those new rules created. A world where truth is tribal, where loyalty trumps principle, where chaos is strategy, where shame is obsolete, where institutions are enemies, and where winning is the only thing that matters. The strategy worked. That's undeniable. Whether it was good for America, whether it strengthened or weakened democracy, whether it made the country better or worse, those are different questions. But the strategy itself? It was brilliant. Immoral, destructive, dangerous, but brilliant. And that's why it will be copied. That's why it changed politics forever. Because Trump proved that this strategy wins. And in politics, winning is everything. He taught a generation of politicians that you don't need experience, you don't need detailed policies, you don't need to follow norms, you don't need institutional support. You just need shamelessness, media savvy, and a loyal base. That's the strategy that changed American politics forever. And there's no going back.